All right, welcome back into another episode of The Pit. I'm Drew Pavant here in Columbus, Georgia, joined by Aaron Mukes down at WALB in Albany, Georgia, and of course, the man, the myth, the legend, Ryan Kelly down in Tallahassee, Florida, covering our deep south of Georgia. Guys, good bit to talk about this week. Last week, Tuesday, the early week draft for the NBA. Hawks had 2 first-round picks, kind of like what they did. Aaron, I'll start with you. Your thoughts on Ejiofor and Flemings for the Hawks.
Oh man, I've been super excited to talk about this kind of all week because I thought the NBA draft was bigger than it's been in the past years. I thought there was more depth of talent getting into those later first round picks. I love what the Hawks did. I know a lot of people thought the Hawks were going to use that first pick to go get somebody big, but there was just so many good guards in this draft, especially young guards. Kingston Flemings was one of my favorites coming out. I was excited for him to still be there when Atlanta picked. This is a guy who's versatile. His ability to do it on both ends of the floor, I thought really fits with what the Atlanta Hawks are trying to do, especially with guys like Dyson Daniels, who's a really good defender, obviously, and just the playmakers they have around him. I know some people were concerned about his ability to be in a playmaking role and still have Jalen Johnson handle the ball and be a playmaker the way he's been. I think they're going to complement each other really, really well. I just thought the Hawks said, look, we're going to get the best available player, no matter who that is. And I thought Flemings was a good choice for that. And then you look what they did even later in the draft. They took an undersized big man in is it Ejiofor? I keep saying his name wrong, but I think it's Ejiofor. They took a little bit of an undersized guy that just does all the dirty work. He kind of reminds me of and people are going to kill me for this, but like a Draymond Green without the antics, I guess you can say. And so I think he kind of fits a role playing. He can stretch the floor a little bit. It's going to be kind of awkward to see him and maybe how Okongwu kind of fit together because they're very similar in styles. But then when you think they're just, okay, they're going to be done, they're not going to get that big man. They take a second rounder in Henry Visar. And look, this was a guy that was number 2 in voting for the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar Award. A big guy. He started to come on towards down the stretch of the season. I just think they addressed their needs in the draft. Now you talk about free agency and what they can do going forward. I think if you fit a couple of pieces in to add to what they built off of last year, you could bring CJ McCollum back. I think it's a good start for Atlanta. I know they're not the sexy team. People are looking at where some of the bigger stars go in the NBA, especially as free agency hits this week. I kind of like what Atlanta did, and I thought they addressed their biggest needs. And to me, when I'm looking at a draft, that's really what I'm looking for. Where are your deficiencies, and how do you address them? And I thought they did a good job of that last week.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you mentioned it was just, people thought, they needed that second center. And I think with that, how that first round top 10 picks were looking was you really couldn't miss with those guards. Because once you got to 5 through 9, whatever it was, there was 4 point guards that surely you just couldn't really miss on. Michael Brown obviously going to the Nets, and then you go with Darius Acuff going to Sacramento, and it was like, okay, well, Flemings is a perfect pick as well. And it kind of fits more of what they were doing. Like Acuff, I know a lot of people in Atlanta were like, well, he might slide to us, and he's a monster. I've seen him play in person. Like, he's just a scoring machine.
He was never getting past
last week. Kind of reminds me of like Trae Young's senior season at Oklahoma. Like, this dude was just taken off, like, just give him the ball, let him work. So I like the pick with Flemings. You kind of land perfectly. And then the Ejiofor pick was different because Ejiofor was Big East unanimous player of the year. He was a monster for the Johnnies and Rick Pitino, but he's undersized. Is he a 4? Is he's not really a stretch 4? Is he a center? You're not too sure if he's that prototypical big man for the NBA, but it kind of worked because they can put him in different spots. And then the Vesar pick was kind of, I feel like a steal for pick 52, like a guy who was mocked in those like past lottery picks and had such a good career at UNC this past year. Kind of works out for him because he'll be the backup. Like you mentioned, free agency's coming up. I think they're going to address that big man situation, and won't be the only move the Hawks make. Obviously, with McCollum getting re-signed and traded for Wiggins, another wing to add to that group. Ryan, your overall reaction to this draft and what you thought the Hawks did?
Well, I love what Aaron said, that this was a needs draft, but this also feels like a culture draft as well. I mean, you take a look at these schools, you take a look at these guys. When you take a guy from Kelvin Sampson's program, you know exactly what you're getting. You're getting an athletic guy, you're getting a guy that's going to play both ends of the floor, high energy, unselfish. Listen, Flemings isn't the highest volume shooter, but I mean, just under 38% beyond the arc, going to be solid. You mentioned it. This was a big run on point guards in the first top 10 picks. What is it, 4 straight, 5 through 9? He feels about as natural as they get on the bunch. CJ McCollum, of course, just signed a 1-year deal. So let's see how Flemings looks. Let's see how things progresses. Let's see just what a McCollum future with Atlanta looks like moving forward. Of course, such a big star and was so good for them through a season ago. But you look at that, St. John's, you look at Ejiofor. I'm going to try to not stumble over that last name as well. You mentioned it, and right in my notes too. Undersized guy, but absolutely a problem in the paint, absolutely clogging, loves to get boards, high effort, high energy, high tempo. This is what the Hawks want to be. This is how they want to play. And then you look at Visar out of UNC, same way. Anytime you get the Hubert Davis, Roy Williams DNA out of North Carolina, you know you're going to get high intensity. You know you're going to get high effort. He's maybe a little stiffer than you would expect out of an NBA 5, at least in today's modern NBA, but can shoot a little bit, does a little bit of what you need him to do. But listen, it's the 52nd pick. It's the late second round of the NBA draft. You're allowed to take a flyer. You're allowed to do some interesting things. So I'm interested to see how that turns out. But at the end of the day, this is all DNA, high effort, high intensity, guys who like to play really, really hard. This is an identity draft for the Hawks as well as a needs draft.
Now, they addressed that size, and I felt like that was kind of the knock on the Hawks in that second half of the year, especially when you saw them down the stretch against the Knicks, who were a bigger team with Cat and Mitchell Robinson, that they didn't have the size to really match up for it. Now, you address those needs in the draft with Ejiofor and VSR and two guys who can play down low and get really aggressive and just kind of clean the boards a little bit, what you kind of need, because you have a lot of talented guards and you got some forwards that could do something. Now it's just kind of addressing what you're going to do when it comes to free agency, because it feels like the NBA has been pretty active. I know we saw the LaMelo Ball trade over the weekend. That kind of took everyone by surprise when I was just like, I went to bed reading, oh yeah, LaMelo Ball might get traded. I'm like, yeah, sure, that'll happen. And I wake up and he was traded to the Timberwolves, and 10 minutes after that rumor came out. But Aaron, I'll go back to you. Just what are the Hawks' biggest needs going into free agency after this draft and trying to fill out how this team's looking? It feels like the starting rotation's pretty set in stone right now.
Yeah, I think you're just seeing the beginning of the NBA landscape kind of shifting. We saw the Giannis trade. You mentioned the LaMelo Ball trade. Now all eyes are going to be on the LeBron James sweepstakes. Where is he going to go? There's already talks earlier about now the Warriors making a move for him and Anthony Davis. Look, the Hawks aren't going to be a big attraction to me in free agency. I don't think teams or players look at the Hawks and say, hey, that's a place that I want to go right now because they're ready to win a championship, especially some of the veteran players that are going to be required or needed to maybe put a team over the top. The Hawks really have one thing they're looking at. How does Jalen Johnson develop, and can he be a 1A on a championship team? Because without the big signing of a superstar free agent or a guy turning into a superstar, maybe it's a Kingston Fleming, or maybe it is Jalen Johnson taking that next step and elevating this roster, I don't know if they have enough. Like, we can sit here and be all happy for them. They took, a couple of guys that might be good in the draft and they might turn out to be really good, solid NBA players. But the league is still built on stars. And the New York Knicks winning the championship this past season was the first time we really seen a team that quote unquote didn't have a star, even though Brunson likely is one, actually take and win a championship. So to me, it's about the growth of Jalen Johnson and then where do you fit the pieces around him. So Jalen Johnson to me has to be a guy that takes the next step. And then you're looking for, can I go get a big like Mitchell Robinson who can give me minutes off the bench and give me some fouls off the bench or some rebounds on the offensive glass, and finding a wing shooter that can consistently knock down threes. And then again, you bring in a guy like Kingston Fleming who can be a floor general and kind of distribute and kind of control the offense. So to me, it's not about necessarily a big splash in free agency. Is Jalen Johnson going to be able to elevate himself to a star level player? So we talk about Jaylen Browns, the Jason Tatums, how they were able to build as young, really good young players, but take that next step. And if Jalen Johnson can do that, then I think this team really makes a push at trying to contend. But until they get that guy, I don't really know. I think it's kind of just all for show when we sit here and talk about, maybe a playoff appearance. Can they win a series or so? But when we're talking about championship basketball, you need a guy. And we've seen that over the past 8 years. Every NBA champion has a guy that can close and has a guy we look at as a superstar. And I think Atlanta still needs to either develop that or find that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. Kind of the model of the NBA, I feel like, has changed over these past couple of years. Is like we used to have you need that big three, and then you just fill it in with minimum players. That's kind of changed, and the Knicks showed that. Like Brunson's a star, but they had guys around him like OG Anunoby, like Bridges, the Josh Hart, Cat. Like the list goes on. If you fill out your roster building around the talent you have, but the question is, and you mentioned it, key word is you got to have a closer. You got to trust someone in the middle, like at the end of the game, and you're the heat of the playoffs in a game 7, who's going to take that final shot and who's going to hit it. Now, Ryan, who can be that guy? I know we mentioned Jalen Johnson to potentially build off this team, but going forward with this Hawks team, like they have the talent. We've seen the flashes, but it hasn't been Atlanta in those conversations of being a sexy landing spot, I guess, for free agents to land in this year. So, Ryan, what can Atlanta do, I guess, to build off that second half they had and be a real selling point for free agents?
I think it's what Aaron said. You have to develop from within. You have to continue to foster this identity, but you've got to get one of those guys moving forward in your organization. If it is Jalen, it's Jalen, so be it. But I look at this squad and I look at Atlanta. In the NBA, you see some exceptions. You see Oklahoma City, and obviously what they've done with SGA is in particular. But the star markets are the star markets. The places to go are the places to go. Atlanta feels like it should tick all that boxes, right? This is a top 5 media market. This is a place in the Southeast. This is a huge epicenter. But sometimes in sports, you are what you are until you aren't. Until Atlanta can get that guy or develop that guy, like Aaron said, it's going to continue to have that reputation. I think you're going to have to develop from within that, or you just somehow pull off a blockbuster trade. Who knows? How about the Anthony Davis, LeBron James super team in Atlanta? That's not going to happen, obviously, but why not? This has been a crazy NBA offseason. So I did want to ask you guys, just because I feel like Aaron touched on most of the points I wanted to as far as moving forward. Would Steph, LeBron, and Anthony Davis be the most obnoxious big three in the history of professional basketball?
Aaron, you want to go first?
Obnoxious? Why? Obnoxious? Why? Listen, I'm
not necessarily them. The
I heard this morning. I'm all for it.
Them would be the worst.
I am all for it. Listen, regardless of whether they're capable of winning a championship together or just having them stay healthy and play an entire season, I'm all for it. All the eyeballs on them, the Steph, LeBron kind of going out the end to end their career. I think it's actually a perfect fit basketball-wise when you talk about a guy that likes to play off the ball in Steph and a point forward in LeBron. From a basketball standpoint, I think it's actually a really, really good move. Now, are they going to be able to beat 100%. Teams like the young Spurs or the young OKC? I don't know. I'd love the circus. Bring the circus to town. Let it come out. Let everybody talk about it. I would love for LeBron's career to end that way. To me, it would be special because there's no way LeBron would be going to a team, in my opinion, like an Atlanta or really anywhere else. I see him coming back to the Lakers. I see it in Golden State and possibly a Cleveland. I don't know if there's too many other spots that LeBron really is going to think about playing with. And so give it to me what people want to see. I wish this was 5 years ago, but hey, look, I'm from California. Would love to see Steph and LeBron play together.
Now, I don't know if it's a sideshow part of it, but I feel like we've had some crazy big threes that have been assembled, like of fading, like veteran players who were stars like 8 years ago. Like, look at Harden and Kyrie and KD and Brooklyn. Like, that was insane. And none of those guys stayed on the floor together.
Kobe, Dwight Howard, and Nash.
Yeah, that's another one. Well, I always think about it, and this is when I grew up, like being from New York, was when the Nets traded for Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce, and I can't remember the other guy's name, and all they gave up was like Gerald Wallace and a bunch of picks at the time that didn't mean anything. And now the Celtics, have their own little superstar going up there. I don't know. That's a crazy take. I mean, if he does end up going to Golden State, I mean, the Draymond declining his option kind of opens that up. But seeing LeBron in Golden State with Steph Curry, that put a lot of butts in seats, and your tickets are probably $200 no matter what game, who you're playing.
If they play in California, those tickets are expensive anyways.
Yeah. See, this is pro sports anymore, guys. The tickets are expensive if you stink. So
Very true. It's tough, but I do think that's a ticket that I would be willing to pay for. And I know despite the funniness of, oh, they're a lot older. LeBron will be 42, Steph's 38. A lot of people would underestimate them because of their age. But I always tell people this: look, you have guys that are playing at the level that they're playing at. You can only discredit them so much. I know, like, everybody's waiting for the fall off of these guys. And I think we did this with Tom Brady. And you say, like, this is the year. He can't do it again. He's 37. He can't do it again. It's 38. And then LeBron at age 41 still averages 25, 7, and 6 or whatever it is and leads his team past the Rockets in the first round. Some guys are just built to be different. LeBron James is one of those guys. He's built to be different. Steph Curry, he runs around and shoots. He's in good shape. As long as he stays healthy, runs around, he's going to be able to shoot the ball till he's 55. So for me, to discredit them because of their age, and I'm not saying that they can't, again, I'm not saying that they're going to go and win a championship, but that is a team that I would not want to play with all of that championship experience. If they happen to get AD, obviously we would cross our fingers and see if he can stay healthy. But even if they didn't get AD and Draymond just comes back for a little bit of time and they have Jimmy Butler, like, that's a team that I'm not wanting to play if I'm any team in the postseason because of that experience, their mentality, and their ability to win games. And you talk about closing earlier. There's not a team with better closers than Steph, LeBron, and Jimmy Butler. Like, honestly, those are three of the guys that have done it in the game for a long time. So I think it would be fun, and I'm all for it.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I just want to completely forget Jimmy Butler's on that Warriors team. And imagine that four. I mean, also another take. Are they just trying to get Anthony Davis to get that first pick next year?
Well, the thing with AD is I think you try to trade for AD first, right? You try to trade for AD because they have 4 draft picks that they can give up. So they can give away 4 first-round picks if they really want to go all in. And Washington would then turn Anthony Davis from 2 first-round picks, which they gave up, never played for them, and get 4 back. That's a win for Washington as well. But if you trade for AD, I think that entices LeBron to maybe think about coming there and playing. I think that's the route they're going. And if that happens, all things considered, health on the table, they're all healthy. I just don't want to play them. That's a team that can compete.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. All right, we're going to wrap up this block of the pit. We'll talk some Braves coming up next. Hawks, big day in the draft, but more to come still on the pit. All right, welcome back into the pit. We just got done talking a little bit NBA draft for the Hawks and, a bunch of hypotheticals with LeBron James going to the Golden State Warriors. But it's time to recap the Braves this week, and another tough week for the Atlanta Braves. This one, 1-5 on their West Coast trip to California, getting swept by the Padres, and then going 1-2 in their series against the San Francisco Giants. Teams batting just .215 in this month of June in the last 28 days. And we talked about it a couple weeks ago. They got that 10-game lead over the Phils. They'll be all right. Phillies are now just 3 games back because the Phillies are one of the hotter teams in the major leagues right now. Ryan, I'll start with you. Is it time to hit the panic button for this Braves team right now?
See, this was a move of 3D chess. I brought up LeBron and all of that, so we didn't have to talk about the Braves all that much because, yikes, it's been really tough here throughout June. This was the team that we kind of thought this was going to be going into this season, right? And then the winning streak happened, and it just never seemed to tail off enough to where we were basically just talking about, hey, we're talking about the same thing every week. They look good. They're playing above their head. The guys that you think are just going to be role players continue to have production. But the problem isn't necessarily that the Braves aren't winning. The problem, as we talked about and as you talked about right there, Drew, is that the Phillies are. That lineup was far too good to stay mediocre throughout the season. So now you've got the Phils putting it together. They're absolutely crushing teams. And you've got the Braves who can't seem to find their identity offensively, at least on a consistent basis, going one win throughout that. And listen, I get it. The Padres are pretty good. The Giants stink. Buster Posey's future is going to be a big, big question mark throughout the rest of this season. What's going to go on there? But now the Braves have a chance to rectify this. A 4-game series against the Mets. The 15 games back, lowly, firing everybody. Team reporters are talking about guys getting fired while Mr. Met is dancing in the background. New York Mets. You have to be above the dumpster fire right now. You have to do this because if not, the Phillies are going to close that gap. I'm not hitting the panic button for Atlanta just yet. This is a team that's maybe regressing to the mean a little bit. I don't think they're quite as bad as they've played throughout June. I don't think they're quite as good as we saw throughout the early months of this season. But if you can just kind of hit the median, stop the bleeding, and keep the Phillies at enough of an arm's length, this can still be an A-OK season for Atlanta.
Yeah, absolutely. And Aaron, I got to pose the question to you, and our producer Jeremy brought this up. Do you think it's the Braves were just exceeding so high with their expectations, or is it they're just coming down to earth a little bit, and the Braves fans are like, we played so well for 2 months straight. What's happening now?
I think it's a little bit of what Ryan said. I'm kind of in the same boat. No panic. When you talk about a team that got out to the start the Atlanta Braves did, it's Major League Baseball. It's 162 games. It's a long season. There was going to be a stretch where they struggled. It just happens to be the same time the Phillies are playing really well. It's not like this team has lost 12, 13 straight games. They're going through a little bit of a slump. You do have to worry whenever a team goes out and tries to sign Carlos Santana. That's, you got to start wondering why are we doing moves like that? Are we panicking? Things like that. But look, this is Atlanta Braves team has been good since the start of the season. Yes, they struggled out west. It's hard to go out west and play well, especially when you're playing against teams you probably should beat. There's a little bit of complacency there, and they struggled. There's going to be a point in time later this year where the Phillies are going to do the same thing. They're going to struggle against bad teams, and the Braves might get hot again. Baseball's so long. It is really hard for me to even get too high or too low this early into the year. We're not at the All-Star break yet. If this was August, middle of August, and they're struggling like this against teams they should be beating, then we might have a different conversation. But right now, I'm not hitting the panic button. They've had injuries. Their lineup's been all over the place. They haven't had consistent guys in the lineup. I think that has something to do with that cohesiveness of what this team really hasn't been able to do. And yet they're still leading the division. They're, a few games back of being still the top overall seed in the National League. I think panic meter would be a little bit too early for me. But I do think at some point in time, you mentioned the Phillies being 3 games back. You're going to look back and they're going to be a game back, and then they're going to be right there with you and maybe even take the lead. And at that point, you do have to look at each other and say, okay, we can't let this spiral out of control because we know what can happen when it does. We saw it, 2 years ago when we started off that slow. So I think they'll have to come back to earth. But it's probably somewhere in between. They're not as good as they were early on. They're not as bad as they're playing right now. I do think they'll figure it out. They just have to continue to try to split these series, win a couple of series, and I think ultimately they'll be right there in the end. But there's a little bit of concern, but I'm not panicking.
Yeah, I don't think panic is yet. I think when you get to that point in July where you're supposed to be buyers and you're continuing to fall down the slope where the Phillies could take the division lead in a couple weeks, you got to address what the problems are with this team. Like, you need outfielders, you need help in the middle of the infield at shortstop, and you need to get some help in that bullpen with relief guys coming in to step up and close out games when you need them the most. Because when the bats aren't there, the pitching's doing well, but when the bats show up, sometimes the pitching kind of crumbles a little bit. And addressing needs and addressing things that need to go. If we could pull up that graphic again, the sad song Kim story needs to probably end here. The .068 batting average in 26 games for the Braves since his return from the IL at short. You got to go in a different direction. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, that's brutal.
Jim Jarvis played really well when they called him up, but now with Sad Song Kim up there, you got to make a move, and that's part of it when you can address these things when it comes to July. Aaron?
Yeah, so I guess my question back would be, there's been talks that the Braves could be one of the potential landing spots for Tariq Skubal. Do you try to just go out and say, hey, we're going to go get another dominant starting pitcher and see if we can just ride the back of Chris Sale and Skubal, and maybe we get another arm back in Strider eventually if he comes back and does his thing? Do you do that, or do you use some of those prospects and some of those pieces to go out and try to address the lineup issues? And I think that's maybe where the Braves are torn right now, is if you're going to be a buyer at the deadline, which way do you go? I'm of the mindset you let the bats work out of their struggles, because I still think this lineup can be very strong, and you go get a guy like Skubal. If the Braves have any shot of getting Skubal and getting into the postseason, they will be a favorite in the postseason with those two arms, because they can win any 7-game series. That's where pitching really shines, is in the postseason. In these long stretches of the regular season, you need bats to be consistent. Your arms are kind of up and down. So you have to make that decision if you're in the front office. If you're Anthopoulos. What do you choose to do? I don't think they can make a play for both. And I think that's where the real question lies. Do you go get an arm like Scooble and give up some of those prospects and maybe go grab a few pieces that might help but aren't going to put you over the top in the lineup? Or are you going to try to address the bats, the defense, and say, you know what, we feel strong enough in our pitching staff if we were able to make a postseason run? But to me, I'm a guy that likes pitching in the postseason. Go get me Scooble. Go get me the best pitcher in baseball and tag that up with Chris Sale, and I'll figure it out. Like, that's how I feel as a baseball guy. But that's a question they're going to have to answer.
Yeah, Ryan, your thoughts on maybe getting a big arm like Scooble? I feel like the needs kind of outweigh, their rotation's been solid at times and they have younger guys, but is it worth to shell out all those pieces? Like the Dodgers have a lot of prospects they could just give away. And I don't know if that's too rich for AA's blood to try to get a Scooble who, his contract's going to be up, a guy you got to pay. And we've seen the Braves before. They haven't willingly shelled out that money. We saw it with Max Fried a couple of years ago, and he's been great with the Yankees. How do you address these needs at the deadline, Ryan?
Well, listen, I'm not a Dodgers guy. I'm an Angels guy. So I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, get on the phone right now. Come make us a deal for Reed Detmers. You need an outfielder. Come make a deal for Joe Adell. Perry Manassian's looking for a job. I'm sure Alex would love to have him back in the front office. And while you're at it, Atlanta, you don't want to be owned by a conglomerate. You want to be owned by an overreaching owner like Artie Moreno. So why don't you just take Artie, too? Enough of the bit, though. Enough of all that. Just to say, listen, I think Scuba would be phenomenal. I do think Adele could be a good piece if they want outfielders. There are certain pieces that the Braves can do. I'm very interested to see how they handle this deadline.
Yeah, the Scooble move, I don't know if it's too aggressive for the Braves. Like when their names start flowing around, it just seems so unbrave.
Do you let the Dodgers get him?
Yeah, I mean that's
the thing is he's going to go to the Dodgers and then.
The Dodgers got
if you go get Scooble, you keep the Dodgers from getting him.
AAA system that they could willingly.
But that's what I'm saying. Like
100 list.
If the Dodgers get Scooble, good luck to the rest of the Major League Baseball. Like the Dodgers are going to win the championship again. I mean, they were probably going to win it again anyways. And let alone if you get Scooble, you're likely to win it again. To me, it's like, yes, the Braves might have some deficiencies, but if I'm the Atlanta Braves, I think I can piecemeal together me to a postseason and having Sale and Scooble at the top of my rotation in any 7-game series. I'm saying those two lefties go get me 2 wins, and I'll find a way with Grant Holmes and Strider if he's back, and Reynaldo Lopez and some of these guys to figure out how to win those game 3 and get me back to my aces. I think with 2 guys at the top of your rotation that good, you have a chance to win the World Series, and all you need is timely hitting and guys to get hot at the right time. And it's not like the Braves don't have that in their lineup. Michael Harris Jr. can get hot. Acuna can get hot. Olsen can hit. Like, they have guys that can do it. I'm more of that. I'm more thinking ahead. I'm already putting them in the postseason, and maybe that's a little far-fetched now with the way they've been playing. But I think it's for a World Series, which is where I have the Braves peak. I just think having the 2 arms at that level, that could do them wonders. And you keep the Dodgers from getting that guy.
I think you're right. I mean, the talent that the Braves could bring in with what they have in their farm system, if they're willing to go all in, you got to go in because like Sale. How many more years are you going to get of this level of Chris Sale? You got to think about his age and his injury history that you're willing to go all in right now, or it's got to show up. And they have some holes that they got to fill, but you got to address those when it comes down to the deadline. You got to decide if this is the team that we're going to go and roll into with. We got to go all in now. But hey, that's all the time we got for this week's episode of The Pit. We'll be back next week for your Georgia Regional Sports Show. Thanks for joining us.